Her stepmother counted the flour sacks before she let go of Clara's arm. 11, she said. That's 11 and a horse. Say thank you. Clara Weaver looked at the man they'd sold her to, the cripple, the one the whole town said was half dead, and she said nothing at all. He didn't look at her either. He looked at Sarah Weaver and said 4 words flat as a table. You counted them wrong. The whole street went quiet, because nobody had ever heard that man speak, and because he was right. Before we go, one step further. If you love stories about the people everyone underestimates, buried secrets and justice that takes its time, take 1 second and hit subscribe. Stay with me all the way to the end, because what's behind the rock face on that mountain will change how you see every single scene that comes before it. And down in the comments, tell me what city you're watching from tonight. I want to see just how far this story has traveled. Now, let's begin. 4 hours before that, Clara Weaver was scrubbing a floor she'd scrubbed 900 times. Clara. She didn't look up. Clara Ruth. I hear you. Then answer when you're spoken to. Clara Weaver sat back on her heels. 19 years old hands like a woman of 40, and she had been in that house since she was 7, and she had learned exactly one useful thing in 12 years. Never answer the first time. Make them say it twice. It costs them something. Ma'am. Sarah Weaver stood in that doorway with her arms folded. Get up. Wash your face. Put on the blue one. Clara Weaver went cold from the neck down. Why? Because I said. There's no why, Clara said. You don't tell me to put on the blue one unless there's a why. There hasn't been a why since Papa's funeral. And Sarah Weaver said, there's a man coming at noon. Clara Weaver stood up. No. Clara. No. You'll do as you're told. I'm 19 years old. You're a mouth, Sarah Weaver said. That's what you are. You're a mouth in a house with no money and 11 bad months behind it. And Clara Ruth, I have carried you since your father put himself in the ground, and I have never once. He didn't put himself anywhere. The kitchen went silent. What did you say? I said he didn't put himself anywhere, Clara Weaver said. He got sick in February, and there was no doctor, and there was no money, and there was no anything, ma'am, and I sat with him for 9 days, and you sat in the front room with the door shut, and don't you ever say it like he chose it. Sarah Weaver hit her. It wasn't the first time. It wasn't even the worst time. But Clara Weaver would remember that one until she was 80 years old, because of what came after it, and because of what Sarah Weaver said while her hand was still in the air. Elias Boone, she said. Clara Weaver put her hand on the wall. What? Elias Boone. From up the mountain. That's not... She couldn't get air. Ma'am, that's not funny. I'm not funny. That man's a cripple. That man's got 11 sacks of flour, Sarah Weaver said, and a stud horse, and he's carrying our note at the store, and Clara Ruth, you are going to wash your face. Clara Weaver started laughing. That's the part her stepmother never got over. She'd expected screaming. She'd braced for screaming. And this girl stood in that kitchen with a red mark coming up on her face and laughed, and it was the ugliest sound Sarah Weaver had ever heard in her life. You sold me. Don't be dramatic. You sold me for flour. There's a horse. You sold me for flour, Clara Weaver said. Sarah Weaver's face did something. It was small. It was maybe half a second. And Clara Weaver, who had spent 12 years reading that woman's face the way sailors read weather, saw it and went absolutely still. You didn't pick him, she said. Clara, you didn't pick him. She was breathing hard. Ma'am, look at me. Look at me. You didn't pick him, did you? Somebody told you. Sarah Weaver said, get dressed. Who told you? Get dressed. And Clara Weaver said, who came to this house? Boo. Nobody answered her. That was the thing. That was the whole thing. And it would take Clara Weaver 4 months to understand what she'd been standing next to in that kitchen. Sarah Weaver did not answer her. And Sarah Weaver had never once in 12 years failed to answer a question with a slap or a sentence. And this time, she just turned around and walked out. Clara Weaver stood in that kitchen alone, and she said out loud to nobody, "Somebody came to this house." She had 4 hours, and she used all of them. She went out the back and down the alley, and she went to the one person in that town who'd ever given her anything, which was a 70-year-old woman named Nell Poole, who ran the boarding house and had fed her cornbread out a window since she was 9. "Nell, baby." "Nell, they sold me." Nell Poole put down a pan. "Say that again." "They sold me to Elias Boone." Clara Weaver was shaking so hard she had to hold the counter. "Noon, today. 11 sacks of flour, and a horse, and the note at the store." And Nell Poole said, "Oh, honey. Don't, oh, honey me. Baby. Nell, tell me about him." Clara had her by both hands now. "Tell me about him. Everybody in this town's got a story about that man, and I've heard about 400 of them, and I have never once heard one from somebody who met him." Nell Poole stood in that kitchen a long moment. "That's because nobody has," she said. Clara Weaver sat down. "What? Nobody's met him, baby." Nell Poole's voice had dropped. "That's what I'm telling you, and you'd better hear it. That man's been up that mountain 9 years, and he comes down twice a year, and he don't talk to a soul. Everybody says a lot. They say he's crippled. He is. They say he can't walk. He walks," Nell Poole said. "He walked into this town in April. I watched him do it. He's got a bad leg, and he uses a stick, and he walked 11 miles down that mountain and 11 miles back up it in the same day. And there's not 4 men in this county could do that on 2 good ones." Clara Weaver said, "Then why do they?" And Nell Poole said, "Because he don't talk." That's it, baby." Nell Poole sat down across from her. "That's the whole thing. 9 years. That man has never once told anybody in this town one single thing about himself, and people can't stand it. So they made him up." "Nell? They made up the leg, and they made up the temper, and they made up a wife he killed in Colorado," Nell Poole said. "And honey, I've heard the Colorado one 4 different ways from 4 different men, and every one of them had a different woman in it." Clara Weaver put her face in her hands. "Then what's true?" "I know 2 things," Nell Poole said. "What?" "He's got money," Nell Poole said, "and he don't spend it." Clara Weaver looked up. "What?" "That man carries paper on 9 families in this county. Nell. 9 baby, the Ferris place, the Dolans, old Amos at the mill. Your daddy's note at the store, Clara. Who do you think holds that note?" Clara Weaver said, "The store." "The store's been sold twice since '78, Nell Poole said. "Honey, that store don't hold a nickel of paper. That store's a building." Clara Weaver stood up. "Then who holds my father's note?" And Nell Poole said, "Elias Boone." The kitchen was silent for 11 seconds. "That's not..." Clara Weaver had gone white. "That's not possible. Nell, that note's 4 years old. My father signed it before that's before Boone even..." She stopped. "When'd he come up that mountain?" she said. 9 years ago." 9 years, baby. 1873. And Clara Weaver said, "My father signed that note in '78. She sat back down. "He's been here 5 years, she said slowly. "He's been here 5 years before my father ever borrowed $1. Clara. Nell, he's been holding my father's note for 4 years. Yes. And he never came for it." Nell Poole did not say anything. "He never came for it," Clara Weaver said again. 4 years. My father died on that note, Nell. He died owing it. And I've been in that house 12 years, and there has never once been a man at that door about money. And I always thought..." She stopped. She put her hand over her mouth. "I always thought it was because we were beneath asking," she said. Nell Poole reached across and took both her hands. Baby, don't. Clara Ruth, listen to me. Nell, he's been carrying us for 4 years and today he sent for me. Clara, that's worse, Clara Weaver said. Do you understand? That's worse. That's not a stranger buying a girl. That's a man who's been sitting on my daddy's debt for 4 years waiting for me to turn old enough. And Nell Poole said, no, honey, that's not what that is. Then what is it? Nell Poole said, that's a man who came off that mountain today for the first time in 7 months. Clara Weaver stopped. What? He comes down twice a year, Nell Poole said. April and October. 9 years. You could set a clock by that man. She let go of Clara's hands. It's June, baby. The kitchen went absolutely still. He's 4 months early, Nell Poole said. Clara Weaver walked out of that boarding house and she did not go home. She went to the store. She went to the store because she had 90 minutes and she was 19 and she had exactly one idea in her head, and it was a bad one, and she walked in that door and there were 11 men in there, and every single one of them stopped talking, which told her everything. Amos. The storekeeper looked at her like she was on fire. Clara. I want to see my father's note. The store went silent. Clara Ruth. I want to see my father's note, Amos. Her voice was shaking, and she let it. You've got a book behind that counter, and there's a page in it with Thomas Weaver on it, and I'm his daughter, and I'd like to see it. Amos Dill said, You can't. Why not? And Amos Dill said, 'Cause it ain't there. Clara Weaver put both hands on that counter. Say that again. Clara. Say it again, Amos. It ain't in the book, Amos Dill said. It's never been in the book. Your daddy's note come out of my book in 1879, and it went... He stopped. He looked at 11 men who were all pretending to look at seed catalogs. It went somewhere else. Who took it? Ma'am. Who took it out of your book? And Amos Dill said nobody took it. Somebody bought it. Clara Weaver said Boone. Clara. Elias Boone bought my father's note. Ma'am, I ain't at liberty. You're not at liberty. Her voice cracked and 11 men flinched. Amos Dill, I have been coming in this store since I was 7 years old, and you gave me peppermint when my mother died, and you're not at liberty. Amos Dill put both hands on his own counter and hung his head. He bought 9 of them, he said. The store was quiet. 9, Clara Weaver said. 9 notes, out of my book, in 79. Amos Dill wouldn't look up. Come in here in April one day, no warning, hadn't said 4 words to me in 6 years. And he laid a bank draft on that counter, and he said, which ones are you about to call? Nobody in that store breathed, and I told him, Amos Dill said. God help me, I told him, 9 families. I'd been carrying them 3 years, and I couldn't carry them another winter, and I was going to have to call every one of them in the spring, and I'd been sick about it since Christmas. And he bought all 9, Amos Dill said. Clara Weaver sat down on a nail keg. How much, ma'am? How much, Amos? $4,100, Amos Dill said. The store went absolutely silent. That's... Clara Weaver couldn't finish it. Amos, that's nobody in this county's got $4,000. That's not the bank in Boise City hasn't got... I know. Where'd he get $4,000? And Amos Dill said, that's what everybody in this town has wanted to know for 4 years, and there ain't one man alive who's had the sand to ask him. Clara Weaver stood up. Then what'd he do with them? Ma'am, the notes, Amos. She was walking now. He bought 9 notes for $4,000. That's a business. That's a man in business. So what did he do? Did he call them? Did he foreclose? Did he take the Ferris place? Did he take the mill? Amos. Dill did not answer. Amos. He never done nothing. Amos Dill said. Nobody moved. 4 years, Amos Dill said. 4 years, Clara. He bought 9 notes and he put 'em in a bag and he walked up that mountain, and nobody in this county has heard one word about them since. Not a letter, not a demand, not one single man at one single door. That's not 9 families, Amos Dill said, have been sitting in their houses for 4 years waiting for a knock that never come, and every one of 'em thinks it's coming tomorrow, and Clara, that's why they hate him. Clara Weaver stopped. What? And Amos Dill said, 'Cause he saved 'em, and they can't stand it. She got it then. Standing in a store at 11 in the morning on the day she was sold, she got the whole thing at once, and it went through her like cold water. They'd rather he was a monster, she said. Ma'am? They'd rather he was a monster, Clara Weaver said, because if he's a monster, then they owe him nothing. Amos Dill sat down on his own stool. Yes, ma'am, he said. She was 4 steps from that door when a man said her name. Miss Weaver. She turned around. He was standing at the back of that store, and he was about 50, and he had a good coat, and she had never seen him before in her life, and every single man in that room was looking at their boots. Sir, you're Tom Weaver's girl. Yes, sir. That's a hard thing, he said. What's happening to you today? That's a hard thing, and I want you to know there's people in this town who think so. Clara Weaver said, Who are you? And the man said, I'm nobody. I'm just passing through. She should have kept walking. She'd think about that for the rest of her life. She was 4 steps from that door, and she should have kept walking, and instead she said, You know him. Boone. The man smiled. He had a nice smile. No, ma'am, nobody knows Boone. That's rather the point of him. Then why are you talking to me? Because I've got a daughter, he said, and if somebody handed her to a stranger for 11 sacks of flour, I'd want a man in a store to at least say something. Clara Weaver stood there. Ma'am, the man said, may I give you one piece of advice? All right. And the man said, count the flour. She got home at 11:30, and Sarah Weaver had the blue dress on the bed. Where were you? Out. Clara Ruth. Ma'am, there's a man in the store. Sarah Weaver stopped. It was small. It was maybe 1/4 of a second. And Clara Weaver saw it for the second time that day. There's 400 men in the store. 50 years old, Clara Weaver said. Good coat. Nobody knows him. He's passing through. Sarah Weaver turned around and walked out, and Clara Weaver stood in that room with a blue dress on a bed and said out loud to an empty house, He came here. Elias Boone came at noon, and he came with a wagon, and he came alone. The whole town was on that street. That was the thing Clara Weaver never forgot. 400 people, and every single one of them, had found a reason to be outside at noon on a Tuesday. And there were women on porches and men in doorways, and children. There were children up on the rail like it was a hanging. He got down off that wagon. It took him about 11 seconds, and it was not graceful, and nobody laughed, which surprised her more than anything else that day. He got a stick out of the wagon bed. He walked up to Sarah Weaver, and Sarah Weaver said, Mr. Boone. He didn't answer her. He was looking at the flower. 11, Sarah Weaver said. That's 11 and a horse. Clara Ruth say thank you. Clara Weaver said nothing at all, and Elias Boone said, You counted them wrong. The street went silent, because nobody in that county had heard that man speak in 9 years, and because he'd said 4 words, and because he was looking at 11 sacks of flour in the bed of his own wagon with the face of a man reading a column. Sarah Weaver said, I beg your pardon. There's 9. There's 11, "There's 9 sacks of flour," Elias Boone said, "and 2 sacks of chaff with a flour sack on the outside, and ma'am, you knew that when you counted because you counted them out loud." Clara Weaver looked at her stepmother. Sarah Weaver had gone the color of paper. "That's a lie." "No, ma'am." "That's a lie, and I'll not stand in the street and be—" "Then open them," Elias Boone said. Nobody moved. 400 people on a street, and not one of them moved, and Elias Boone stood there with a stick in his hand and did not raise his voice one single time. "Open the 4th one," he said. "And the 9th. Mr. Boone." "Ma'am, I'll do it myself if you'd rather, but I'd rather you did it because there's a lot of people out here, and I'd like it understood that I didn't come down this mountain to shame anybody." Sarah Weaver said, "You wouldn't dare." And Elias Boone said, "Then we've got a problem, ma'am, because I'd dare quite a bit." He cut it open himself. He did it with a knife off his belt, and it took 4 seconds and chaff went all over that street, and there was a sound out of 400 people that Clara Weaver would hear in her sleep for years. It wasn't shock. It was delight. They were delighted. Every single one of them. Her whole town stood there and watched a woman get caught cheating a cripple out of 2 sacks of flour, and they loved it, and Clara Weaver understood in that second that not one person on that street was there for her. She'd been standing in that street 11 minutes, and nobody had said her name. Elias Boone put the knife away. "Ma'am," he said, "I'm going to say something, and then we're done. You owe me 11 sacks, he said. You've given me 9. That's a difference of about $4, and I want you to understand that I don't care about $4. Sarah Weaver said nothing. "But I'm going to tell you what you actually did," Elias Boone said, "and then I'm going to get in that wagon." The street was silent. "You cheated on a transaction," he said, where the goods were standing 4 feet away listening. Clara Weaver's head came up. "You short-counted the flour," Elias Boone said in front of her, out loud, "and you did it because it never once occurred to you that she'd know the difference between flour and chaff and ma'am." He looked at Clara for the first time. "She's been baking your bread since she was 9, he said. Tin. Clara Weaver could not breathe. Sarah Weaver said, "How do you know that?" And Elias Boone said, "Get in the wagon, Miss Weaver." "Mr. Boone?" "I'm not going to stand in this street," Elias Boone said. "Not one more minute. There's 400 people out here, and every one of them came to watch a girl get handed to a cripple, and I'm not going to give them the rest of it." He got up on that wagon. It took him 11 seconds. Nobody laughed. Clara Weaver did not move. "Miss Weaver?" She stood in that street in a blue dress with her whole life in a bundle at her feet, and she did not move. "Miss Weaver, get in the wagon." And Clara Weaver said, "No." The street made a sound. Sarah Weaver said, "Clara Ruth." "No." She turned around. She turned around on 400 people. "No. I'm not getting in a wagon in front of this town. I'll walk." "Clara, I'll walk," Clara Weaver said. 11 miles. I'll walk every foot of it, and every one of you can stand here and watch me do it, and I want you to look at me while I go." Nobody said one word. And Elias Boone said from that wagon seat, "That's about 4 hours." "I know how far it is. It's uphill." "I know how far it is." And Elias Boone said, "All right." He drove that wagon at a walk for 11 miles. That's the part that got her. That's the part that started everything, and she wouldn't understand it for 4 months. He didn't argue. He didn't order her. He didn't get down and pick her up, and he didn't ride off and leave her either. He put that horse at a walk, and he stayed 40 feet ahead of a 19-year-old girl for 4 hours, and every single time she stopped, he stopped. She tested it at mile 3. She stopped dead in the road. The wagon stopped. She stood there 4 minutes. The wagon stood there 4 minutes. She started walking. The wagon started walking. And Clara Weaver, 4 miles up a mountain in a blue dress on the worst day of her life, said out loud to nobody, What in God's name is wrong with you? At mile 7, she got angry. Say something. He didn't turn around. Hey, hey, I'm talking to you. Nothing. 9 years, Clara Weaver shouted at a man's back. 9 years you haven't said 4 words to anybody in this county, and you got down off that wagon today and counted flour, and now you won't. She stopped. Everything in her stopped. You knew, she said. The wagon kept walking. You knew. She was running now. Hey, you knew she'd short you. You knew before you got down. That's why you counted out loud. That's why you did it in the street. Elias Boone stopped that wagon. He did not turn around. Miss Weaver, he said, I've been buying flour in that town for 9 years. Clara Weaver stood in the road. What? 9 years. His back was still to her. Twice a year. And I've had a sack of chaff in that wagon 4 times. That's not 4 times, ma'am, out of 18. Now he turned. And every single time I've got up that mountain and opened it and found chaff, and I've never once said a word about it because I'm a man with a stick, and 400 people in that street would rather I was a monster. Clara Weaver said, Then why today? And Elias Boone said, Because you were standing there. Nobody spoke for a long moment. The wind came off that mountain and there were 2 people on a road, and neither one of them could make a sound. That's not a reason, Clara Weaver said. No, ma'am. That doesn't make any sense, mister, that's not... Miss Weaver. Elias Boone had both hands on the reins, and he wasn't looking at her again. If I take that flour up this mountain and say nothing, then in about a week you figure out what she did. Because you'd figure it out. You've been baking bread since you were 9, and you'd have your hands in that sack by Friday. Clara Weaver couldn't speak. And then you'd know, Elias Boone said, that your stepmother cheated on the price of you and got away with it. Clara Weaver sat down in the road. She sat down right there 4 miles up a mountain in a blue dress and put both hands over her face. Elias Boone did not get down. He sat on that wagon and let her. 11 minutes. And then he said, Miss Weaver. Don't. Ma'am. Don't. I'm going to say one thing, Elias Boone said, and then I'm not going to talk about it again unless you bring it up, and I want you to hear the whole thing before you decide what I am. She didn't answer. I didn't buy you, Elias Boone said. Clara Weaver looked up. You gave her flour. I gave her flour. You gave her a horse. I gave her a horse. Then you bought me. And Elias Boone said, Ma'am, I've been holding your father's note for 4 years. The road went silent. What? $4,100, Elias Boone said. 9 notes, April of 79. Yours was 640, and it's been in a box in my house for 4 years, and I've never once come down that mountain about it. Clara Weaver stood up. I know, she said. I know Amos told me an hour ago. Then you know I could have taken that house any day I liked for 4 years. Yes. So why'd I pay for you? Elias Boone said. Clara Weaver stood in that road. I don't know. Ma'am? I don't know, she said. I've been standing here 4 hours trying to mister. I don't know one single thing about you, and everything I've heard is a lie, and you counted flour in the street, and you've been walking a horse for 4 hours because I said I'd walk, and I don't know. And Elias Boone said, because if I'd taken the note, you'd have been a foreclosure. Nobody moved. And you'd have come up this mountain anyway, he said, because there's nowhere else in this territory for a 19-year-old girl with no people, and you'd have come up here hating me, and you'd have been right to. Clara Weaver put her hand over her mouth. So I paid, Elias Boone said, in front of 400 people, out loud, with a horse so it'd be worth something, and with flour so they'd all count it. Why? And Elias Boone said, so that everybody in that town knows exactly what she did. Clara Weaver said, that's not what? That's not for me. She was walking toward that wagon now. That's not for me, that's for her. That's punishment. You paid 11 sacks of flour to shame a woman in a street, and I was just the... She stopped. Elias Boone was looking at her. Say it, he said. I was just the reason. And Elias Boone said, yes, ma'am. The road went absolutely quiet. That's honest, Clara Weaver said. It's not all of it. Then say the rest. And Elias Boone said, the rest is that I need a partner to get through the winter, and I've been 9 years figuring out that I can't do it alone, and I'm 38 years old with a leg that doesn't work, and I have never once in 9 years asked one single human being on this earth for one single thing. Clara Weaver stood there. So I bought one, Elias Boone said. And ma'am, that's the ugly truth, and I'd rather you had it in the road than in my kitchen. She looked at him a long moment. A partner. Yes, ma'am. Not a wife? No, ma'am. Mister, they sold me to you. They sold you to a man who's been holding a note on that house for 4 years and never called it, Elias Boone said. That's the only fact in this business. Everything else is what a town made up. Clara Weaver said, then what do you want from me? And Elias Boone said, I want you to survive a winter. She got in the wagon at mile 8, not because she'd forgiven anything. She'd tell people that for the rest of her life. And it was true, she got in that wagon because her feet were bleeding and the sun was going, and she'd made her point in front of the only audience that mattered, which was herself. She got up on that seat and sat as far from him as a wagon allows. They rode 3 miles without a word. And then Clara Weaver said, there was a man in the store. Elias Boone's hand stopped on the reins. It was small. It was maybe a quarter of a second. And Clara Weaver, who had spent 12 years reading a face for a living, turned her whole body on that seat. You know him, she said. Hank, Miss Weaver, you know him. I don't know who you're talking about. 50 years old, Clara Weaver said. Good coat. Nobody's ever seen him. He's passing through, and he waited till I was 4 steps from that door, and then he said my name and told me he was sorry about what was happening to me. Elias Boone did not say one word. And then he gave me advice, Clara Weaver said. The wagon rolled. What advice? Elias Boone said. And Clara Weaver said, he told me to count the flour. Say. Elias Boone stopped that wagon. He stopped it dead in the road at 9 o'clock at night, 4 miles from his own gate, and he sat there with both hands on the reins, and he did not move for 11 seconds, and Clara Weaver watched a man's whole face go somewhere she couldn't follow. Mr. Boone? Nothing. Mr. Boone. And Elias Boone said very quietly, say that again. He said, say it exactly. Clara Weaver's hands had gone cold. He said, ma'am, may I give you one piece of advice? And I said, all right. And he said, count the flour. Elias Boone put his head back, and he laughed. It was the worst sound she had ever heard in her life, one short, ugly, wounded thing, and then it stopped like a door. What? Clara Weaver said. What? And Elias Boone said, he didn't tell you to count it, ma'am. He told me to count it, Elias Boone said. He just used your mouth to do it. He just used your mouth to do it, Elias Boone said. And ma'am, that means he was standing in that store watching me get down off this wagon, and he wanted me to know it. Clara Weaver said, why? Because he wanted me to open that sack. That's not... She had both hands on the seat rail. Mr. Boone, that's not why would a stranger want you to open a sack of flour in a street. And Elias Boone said, so that 400 people would watch me do it. He put that horse at a walk again and did not say anything for a mile. Clara Weaver let him have about 90 seconds of it. No? Miss Weaver. No, you don't get to do that. She turned all the way around on that seat. You don't get to say a sentence like that and then drive a wagon. Ma'am, 9 years, she said. 9 years you don't say 4 words to anybody in this county. And today you talked more in one afternoon than in 9 years, and I know that, because I asked everybody, mister. I asked everybody in that town this morning, and not one soul has heard your voice. Elias Boone said nothing. So why'd you break it today? And Elias Boone said, because he made me. Dick. Clara Weaver sat back. Say that again? That's what it was for. His hands were tight on those reins. Ma'am, listen. 9 years I've come off this mountain twice a year and never said a word, and let 400 people make up whatever they liked. That's not shyness. I'm not shy. Miss Weaver, I'm a 38-year-old man with a bad leg, and I have been invisible on purpose since 1873, and it has worked every single day for 9 years. And today, I stood in that street and cut open a flour sack in front of the whole county, Elias Boone said. Clara Weaver's hand went to her mouth. They saw you, she said. They heard me, Elias Boone said. 9 years of a cripple who doesn't talk, and today 400 people found out he counts. Ma'am, do you understand what that does? No. And Elias Boone said, it makes me a man, and I have been very careful for 9 years not to be one. They came through his gate at 11 o'clock at night, and Clara Weaver got down off that wagon and had exactly one thought, and it was not the thought she'd been rehearsing for 4 hours. Where's the rest of it? Elias Boone stopped. Ma'am? Where's the rest of it? She was turning in a circle. There's a cabin. That's a cabin. That's 1 room and a chimney. You've got $4,000, you bought 9 notes, and you live in that. Elias Boone got his stick out of the wagon bed. Yes, ma'am. That's not... There's a bed in there, he said. It's yours. There's a stove, and there's a table, and there's about 200 pounds of meat in the shed, and there's a lamp. And Miss Weaver, I'm going to sleep in the barn, and I'd take it as a kindness if you didn't argue with me about it tonight because I've been up since 4. Clara Weaver said, Mr. Boone. He stopped. You've got $4,000, she said, and Elias Boone said, no, ma'am, I had $4,000. She was in that cabin 11 minutes before she found the first thing that didn't fit. It was a book. It was on a shelf with 4 others, and she took it down because it was the only object in that room that hadn't been made by hand, and she opened it, and she stood there with a lamp and could not make one sound. It was in French. She couldn't read a word of it. That wasn't the thing. The thing was the margins every single page, top to bottom, filled in a hand so small and so precise it looked printed, and it wasn't French. It was numbers. Clara Weaver had gone to school 4 years, but she'd kept her father's books since she was 11, and she knew a column when she saw one. She sat down on the floor with that lamp, and she counted, and there were 400 pages, and there were numbers on every one. D. She was still there at 2 in the morning. That's how he found her. Miss Weaver. She nearly came out of her skin. That's all right. I wasn't. Ma'am, it's on a shelf, Elias Boone said. If I didn't want it read, I'd have put it somewhere. Clara Weaver stood up. I can't read it. No. It's French. It's German, Elias Boone said. She looked at him. How many languages have you got? And Elias Boone said, Miss Weaver, go to bed. She didn't go to bed. She stood in that doorway with a book in her hands, and she was 19 years old, and she had been sold for flour that morning, and she had absolutely nothing left to lose. What's the numbers, ma'am? There's 400 pages of numbers in the margins of a German book, mister. And there's 4 books on that shelf, and I'd bet everything I own, which is a blue dress, that all 4 of them are the same. Her voice was shaking. So what are the numbers? Elias Boone stood in that yard a long time. Essays, he said. What's an essay? And Elias Boone said, Go to bed, Miss Weaver. She learned in 11 days that everything the town said about him was wrong, and she learned it in the ugliest possible way, which was by watching him fail. He couldn't carry water. That was the first thing. Day 3 he went out for water, and he was gone 40 minutes, and she went and found him sitting on the ground 11 feet from the door with 2 buckets, and he'd gotten about 9 feet with them and had to sit down. Clara Weaver said, "How long may you know?" "Ma'am, how long's it taken you every day?" "9 years." "How long's it taken you to get water?" Elias Boone said, "About an hour." "An hour?" "About an hour." And Clara Weaver picked up both buckets and did it in 4 minutes and set them on the table and said, "Say it." "Ma'am, you need me. Say it." And Elias Boone said, "Yes, ma'am, I need you." She cried in the barn that night. She'd deny it later, but Elias Boone heard the whole thing and never said one word about it. Not once, not in 40 years. A 19-year-old girl sitting in a stranger's barn at midnight, sobbing because a man had finally told her she was worth something, and the price was buckets. She came out at 1 in the morning. He was on the porch. "You heard that?" "No, ma'am." "You heard that?" And Elias Boone said, "No, ma'am, I didn't." Clara Weaver sat down 11 feet from him and said, "Thank you." Winter came in October, and it came hard, and by November she could shoot. By December she could trap. By January she could get a horse across a slope she wouldn't have walked across in June, and she'd killed her first elk in the snow with 1 shot at 90 yards. And she'd dressed it out with her own 2 hands and cried about it for an hour, and never told him. And in February she found out he'd been lying to her since June. It started with the flour. "We're low." Elias Boone didn't look up. "We're not low." "Mr. Boone, we're low." She had the barrel open. "There's about 40 pounds. That's 4 weeks." "There's 110 pounds," Elias Boone said. Clara Weaver looked at him. "What?" "There's 110 pounds of flour on this place," Elias Boone said, "and about 90 of it's in the shed under the tarp, and I've been meaning to tell you since November, and I've been a coward about it." Clara Weaver stood up. "Why'd you hide flour from me?" And Elias Boone said, "Because I've been hiding flour from everybody for 9 years." She went out to that shed at 4 in the afternoon, and she moved the tarp, and she stood there for a full minute and could not make a sound. It wasn't 90 pounds. It was 400 pounds, and it was salt, and it was coffee, and it was lamp oil, and it was 2 crates of ammunition, and 11 blankets still in the paper, and it was medicine. There was a wooden case of medicine in the back of that shed, with a Boise City pharmacy label on it, and it had not been opened. She came back in. She stood in that door. "Mr. Boone?" "Ma'am." "There's 400 pounds of flour in that shed." "Yes, ma'am." "There's blankets," Clara Weaver said. "There's 11 blankets in paper. There's a case of medicine that's never been opened. There's enough in that shed for 9 families. Elias Boone put his cup down. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "There is." Clara Weaver sat down. "Say it." "Miss Weaver, say it." And Elias Boone said 9 notes. The cabin went silent. $4,100, he said. April of 79. And I want you to understand something, ma'am. And I've had 9 months to figure out how to say it, and I still can't. Try. I didn't buy those notes to be kind, Elias Boone said. Clara Weaver did not move. I bought them to be quiet, he said. Mads, Amos Dill was going to call 9 families in the spring of 79, Elias Boone said. 9. And you know what happens when 9 families get called in one county in one spring? They leave, Elias Boone said. Ma'am, think, 9 families leave and their ground goes to auction, and it's the cheapest land in the territory for one season, and there'd have been men in that county inside a month. Landmen, surveyors, People with money. People who look at maps. Clara Weaver's hand went to the table. "And I've got a mountain," Elias Boone said. Nobody spoke for 11 seconds. "You bought 9 families," Clara Weaver said slowly. "So nobody would come look at your mountain." "Yes, ma'am." That's exactly what it is," Elias Boone said. "I spent $4,000 in April of '79 to keep this county boring, and every single person down there thinks I'm a monster who's about to knock on their door, and I have never corrected one of them because the fear works better." Clara Weaver stood up. "You let them be scared of you." "Yes, ma'am." "For 4 years." "9," Elias Boone said. "The notes are 4. The rest is 9. Yank. She walked out. She got about 11 feet into that yard and turned around and came back, and she was so angry she could barely say it. "There's a case of medicine in that shed." "Yes, ma'am." "There's a case of medicine in that shed, and Nell Poole's sister died of the pleurisy in November." "I know." "You know. I know exactly when she died," Elias Boone said. "And I know what she died of, and there's 4 ounces of what she needed in that shed. And Miss Weaver, I'm going to tell you the truth, and then you can do what you like with me." "Say it." And Elias Boone said, "I was in that town in October." Clara Weaver sat back down. "What?" "October. My trip, same as always." Elias Boone wouldn't look at her. "And I stood in that store, and Amos Dill said Nell Poole's sisters took bad, and I said nothing at all. And I bought my salt, and I came up this mountain." "Mr. Boone, and I've had that case in the shed since 1880, he said. 2 years. And she died in November, and I've been sitting in this cabin every day since, with 4 ounces of the thing that would have fixed her." Clara Weaver couldn't speak. "So no, ma'am," Elias Boone said. "I'm not a good man. I want that understood in this house tonight, because you've been out there for 9 months learning to shoot, and I've watched you start to think something about me, and I'd rather kill it now." She said, "Then why'd you buy it?" Elias Boone stopped. "Ma'am." "You bought a case of medicine in 1880, Clara Weaver said. 2 years ago. Mr. Boone, why'd you buy a case of medicine for 9 families if you were never going to use it?" He did not answer. "You've got 400 pounds of flour," she said. "You eat about 90 a year. You've got 11 blankets and paper. You've got 2 crates of ammunition, and you shoot maybe 40 rounds a winter." She was standing now. "Mister, that shed isn't yours. That shed's got 9 families in it." Elias Boone put his face in his hands. "You've been getting ready," Clara Weaver said. "For what? Miss Weaver, for what?" She was shouting now in a one-room cabin at a man who hadn't raised his voice in 9 years. "Ready for what's coming." And Elias Boone said, "Him." Clara Weaver sat down. "The man in the store," she said. "Yes, ma'am." "Who is he?" "I don't know his name." "Mr. Boone." "I don't know his name," Elias Boone said, "and I've been trying to find it out for 11 years, and that's the truth, and I'd tell you if I had it." 11 years. 11 years. Clara Weaver said, "You've been up this mountain 9. And Elias Boone said, "Yes, ma'am, that's the part." He got up, and he went to that shelf, and he took down the German book, and he opened it, and he took something out from between 2 pages, and he put it on the table. It was a photograph. Clara Weaver looked at it. There were 6 men in it, and they were standing in front of something she couldn't make out, and every one of them was young, and it took her about 4 seconds to find him. Third from the left. 30 pounds lighter, standing on 2 good legs. "That's you." "That's me." "You're—" She looked closer. "Mr. Boone, you're smiling." "Yes, ma'am." "I've never seen you smile." And Elias Boone said, "No, ma'am, you haven't." She looked at that photograph a long time. "Who are they?" "Engineers. All of them. 5 of us." Elias Boone's voice had gone strange. Colorado School of Mines, 1869. That's Whitcomb, that's Ross, that's me, that's Delaney, that's Hurd. That's 5. Yes, ma'am. Clara Weaver counted again. There's 6 men in this picture, she said. Elias Boone did not say anything. Mr. Boone, there's 6. Yes, ma'am. Then who's the 6th? And Elias Boone said, that's the man in the store. Clara Weaver dropped that photograph. She picked it back up with both hands and got it under the lamp and stared at it, and her whole body had gone cold. That's Mr. This man's young. He was 30. That's 11 years ago. 13, Elias Boone said. That's 1869. Clara Weaver looked up. He'd be 43, she said. Yes, ma'am. The man in the store was 50. And Elias Boone said, Miss Weaver, that man's been 50 for 13 years.
Tuppy.
The cabin was silent. Say that again. He was 50 and 69, Elias Boone said. He told us he was 50. He was our investor, ma'am. He was the money 5 boys out of a school in Colorado with a survey and no capital, and a man in a good coat came to a boarding house in Denver and said he was 50 years old and he'd like to fund us. Clara Weaver said, and he was 30. He was about 30. How do you know? And Elias Boone said, because Whitcomb's mother recognized him. Clara Weaver stood up. Sit down, ma'am. Mr. Boone? Sit down, Elias Boone said, because I've never said this out loud, and I'm going to do it once. She sat down. 1870, Elias Boone said. Whitcomb takes that photograph home at Christmas, and his mother looks at it, and she says, who's the old man? And he says, that's our investor. And she says, Ben, that boy's not a day over 30. He's got a young man's hands. That's not... Ma'am, look at the picture. Clara Weaver looked. And she saw it. 5 boys and a man in a good coat, and everything about him said 50, the coat and the hat, and the way he stood, and his hands were on the shoulder of the boy in front of him, and they were the hands of a man of 30. Oh, she said. Whitcomb told us in February, Elias Boone said, the 5 of us, in a room. He said, fellas, I think our money's lying about his age, and you know what we did? What? We laughed, Elias Boone said. Clara Weaver put her hand over her mouth. We laughed for about 4 minutes, Elias Boone said. Because it was funny. Because who cares, ma'am, who cares? A man wants to look older, so people take him seriously. That's not a crime. That's not even unusual. I've done it myself. And we had a survey, and we had capital, and we were 24 years old, and there was a mountain in Idaho with our name on it. Mr. Boone. And Whitcomb died in April, Elias Boone said. The cabin went absolutely still. Say that again? April of 1870, Elias Boone said. 8 weeks after he made that joke in that room. Cave-in. 24 years old. That's not... Clara Weaver couldn't breathe. Mr. Boone, that's men die in mines, that's not. Ross died in 71, Elias Boone said. Fever. Mr. Delaney went off a trestle in 72, Elias Boone said. Hurd shot himself in Nevada in 73. Clara Weaver stood up so fast her chair went over. That's 4. That's 4, Elias Boone said. That's 4 men in 4 years. That's 4 men in 4 years, Elias Boone agreed. And there were 5 of us in that photograph, ma'am, and I'm the one who's still standing here. Clara Weaver said, your leg. Elias Boone did not answer. Mr. Boone, your leg. 1873, he said. November, 6 weeks after Hurd. What happened? And Elias Boone said, a cable let go. He put both hands flat on that table. I was 40 feet up a shaft, he said, and a cable that had been inspected on Tuesday let go on Thursday, and I went down 30 feet and hit a beam, and the leg came apart in 4 places, and I laid at the bottom of that hole for 9 hours. Clara Weaver had her hand over her mouth. And ma'am, Elias Boone said, here's the thing I've never told a living soul. Say it. He came down and got me, Elias Boone said. Clara Weaver sat down on the floor. He came down that shaft himself, Elias Boone said, at 2 in the morning in a good coat, and he got a rope under my arms and he got me out, and I woke up 9 days later in a bed in Boise City with a doctor who cost more money than I'd ever seen in my life. He saved you. He saved me. Mr. Boone, he sat by that bed for 4 days, Elias Boone said, and he never once talked about the mine, not one word. He talked about books, ma'am. He talked about German. He'd read everything. He was the most interesting man I ever met in my life, and he sat by a bed for 4 days holding a cup for a man with a broken leg, and I have never been that close to another human being before or since. Clara Weaver couldn't speak, and on the 4th day, Elias Boone said, he leaned over and he said, Elias, you're the last one. The cabin was silent for 11 seconds. He said what? He said, you're the last one, Elias Boone said. And he smiled, and he patted my hand, and he walked out of that room, and I have not seen him again until a girl in a blue dress told me about a man in a store. Clara Weaver stood up. That's not a threat. No, ma'am. That's Mr. Boone, that's a man being sad, that's 4 dead friends, and he's... That's what I told myself for 9 years, Elias Boone said. He stood up too. 9 years, ma'am. I have laid in that bed and turned that sentence over about 4,000 times, and every single time I get to the same place. And the place is this. He said it before I asked. What? I was 9 days in a fever, Elias Boone said. I didn't know about Heard. Nobody'd told me about Heard. I woke up in a bed in Boise City, and I didn't know that 4 men were dead. Clara Weaver went white. He told me I was the last one, Elias Boone said, and I didn't know what he meant. She sat down. And then I got out of that bed in February, Elias Boone said, and I couldn't walk, and I got a wagon, and I came up this mountain, and I've been here 9 years. And he never, Elias Boone said. 9 years, not a letter, not a man at the gate, nothing. Then why are you scared? And Elias Boone said, because he's got no reason to be. Clara Weaver said, what? Ma'am, listen. He was pacing now badly, and she'd never once seen him do it. 4 men are dead. I'm alive. If I'm right, if that man did what I think he did, then he left one witness on this earth, and it's me, and he's had 9 years. So why am I not dead? Elias Boone said. Nobody breathed. 9 years, he said. In a cabin. Alone, with a bad leg. Ma'am, a child could have done it. Any night. Any single night in 9 years, and nobody in that town would have looked for me till April. Clara Weaver said, then he doesn't want you dead. No, ma'am. Then what does he want? And Elias Boone said, that's what I've been sitting up here 9 years trying to figure out. She found the tunnel in March. Not because she was looking. That's what she always said. And it was true she was after a wounded doe that had gone into a cut in the rock face, and she went in after it because she'd been up that mountain 9 months, and she'd learned exactly one bad habit, which was that she'd stopped being afraid of it. The doe wasn't in there. There was a wall. It was 4 feet in, and it was fitted stone, and it did not belong on any mountain in Idaho territory. And Clara Weaver stood in front of it with a lamp for about 11 seconds before she understood what she was looking at. Somebody had built it. Somebody had built a wall in a hole in a mountain and then hidden the hole. She got back at 4 in the afternoon. Elias Boone was at the table. He looked up, and he knew. That was the thing she hadn't said one word, and she'd gotten about 4 steps in the door, and he took one look at her face and put down his cup and said, which one? Clara Weaver stopped. What? Which one? Elias Boone said. There's 4. Dud. She dropped her rifle. There's 4 adits on this mountain, ma'am. He hadn't moved. There's 1 above the creek, and there's 1 on the north face, and there's 2 in that draw, and I sealed every one of them myself in 1874 with a bad leg, and it took me 11 months, and I'd like to know which one you found. Clara Weaver said, You sealed it. Yes, ma'am. You, Mr. Boone, there's silver in that mountain. And Elias Boone said, No, ma'am, there isn't. Chapter poem. The cabin went silent. What? There's no silver in that mountain, Elias Boone said. That's... Clara Weaver was shaking her head. That's not Mr. There's a tunnel. There's a fitted stone wall 4 feet inside a rock face. Nobody builds that for... There's no silver, Elias Boone said. There's about $400 of galena, and there's a lot of quartz, and there's a seam that looks like the richest thing in North America for about 11 feet, and then it quits. Clara Weaver sat down. Then what did you seal? And Elias Boone said, I sealed the fact that it quits. Nobody moved. Say that again. Miss Weaver. Elias Boone leaned forward. Those books on that shelf, 400 pages of numbers. You asked me what an assay is, and I told you to go to bed. Yes. An assay's a measurement, he said. It's what's in the rock. And I've got 4 books of them, and every one of them says the same thing, and it took me 2 years and my own leg to find it out. And ma'am, that mountain is the best-looking piece of nothing in the territory of Idaho. Clara Weaver said, You're lying. No, ma'am. You're lying. You've got $4,000, you bought 9 notes. I had $4,000, Elias Boone said. That was my share. 5 boys and an investor, ma'am. That was the last of what he paid us, and I've spent all of it, and there is not $1 left on this place. Clara Weaver stood up. Then why'd you seal it? And Elias Boone said, Because he doesn't know. She put her hand on the table. What? He doesn't know it quits, Elias Boone said. Nobody breathed. He's got the survey from '69, Elias Boone said. The first one. The one that made 5 boys out of a school in Colorado think they'd found the biggest strike since the Comstock. And ma'am, that survey's right. It's not wrong. There's 11 feet of the best silver anybody ever saw in that hole, and I've seen it with my own eyes, and I've held it in my own 2 hands. Then, he's never been past the 11th foot, Elias Boone said. Kim. Clara Weaver sat down very slowly. Nobody has, Elias Boone said. Except me. Because Whitcomb died in April of '70, and Ross died in '71, and Delaney went off a trestle, and Hurd shot himself. And by '72, there was 1 man in the world still cutting rock in that mountain, and it was me. And I went past 11 feet in October of '72, and I sat down in the dark, and I laughed for about 20 minutes. Mr. Boone, 4 men were dead, Elias Boone said. 4. And I'm sitting in a hole in the dark, holding a piece of rock that says, the whole thing's worthless, and I have known that for 11 years, and I have never told 1 living soul. Clara Weaver said, Then you're safe. Elias Boone looked at her. You're safe, she said. Mr. Boone, don't you see it? Tell him it quits. Show him the books. 400 pages, mister. You've got 400 pages of proof that there's nothing in that mountain, and the second he knows that you're just a man with a bad leg on a rock. And Elias Boone said, Ma'am, that's the day he kills me. The cabin was absolutely silent. Why? Clara Weaver whispered. Because I'd be the only person alive, Elias Boone said, who could prove he murdered 4 men for nothing. She stood up. That's why he hasn't come. Yes, ma'am. That's why he's had 9 years, and he's never Mr. Boone. He needs you. He needs me to be quiet, Elias Boone said. He needs a cripple on a mountain who nobody talks to, and who nobody believes, and who hasn't said 4 words in 9 years, and ma'am. He stopped. His face changed. And Clara Weaver watched a man understand something across a table, and she was 19 years old, and she felt the floor of her whole life move. Mr. Boone, I counted the flour. Elias Boone said. He sat down. He sat down like a man whose legs had quit. Mr. Boone. I counted the flour, he said again. In the street, in front of 400 people, out loud. So he told you to make me do it, Elias Boone said. Clara Weaver's hand went to her mouth. 9 years of silence, Elias Boone said, and he walked into a store on a Tuesday and told a 19-year-old girl to say 4 words to me, and I got down off that wagon and I broke it, in front of the whole county. I stood in that street and became a man who talks. Mr. Boone. Ma'am, he was standing in that store, Elias Boone said. He was there. He watched me do it. Clara Weaver said, why? And Elias Boone said, because a silent cripple can't testify. Mom, nobody moved. But a man who counts flour in the street in front of 400 witnesses, Elias Boone said, can. Clara Weaver sat down on the floor. He wants you to talk, she said. He wants me to talk. That's not... She had both hands on her head. That's backwards. That's backwards. Why would he? And Elias Boone said, because he's not afraid of what I know anymore. The lamp guttered. He's afraid of what I've got, Elias Boone said. What have you got? 4 books, Elias Boone said. That's assays. That's 13 years of assays, ma'am. He was standing now. That's every foot of that mountain from 69 to 74, and it's in my hand, and it's dated, and it's the only complete record that exists on this earth, and Miss Weaver. He stopped. Say it, Clara Weaver said. And Elias Boone said, the first 400 pages aren't mine. Clara Weaver stood up. What? The first 400 pages are Whitcomb's, Elias Boone said. 1869 to April of 70. And then it's Ross's hand till 71. And then Delaney's. And then Hurd's. Clara Weaver could not breathe. Every man who kept that book died, Elias Boone said, in the order he kept it. She sat down on the floor. And then it's me, Elias Boone said. November of 73. And I kept it for 11 months, and then I sealed 4 holes in a mountain with a broken leg, and I have not written 1 line in that book in 9 years. Clara Weaver whispered, You stopped. I stopped. You stopped writing, and he stopped. He stopped coming, Elias Boone said. Nobody said anything for a long time. Then Clara Weaver said, Mr. Boone. Ma'am, where's the 6th man's name? Elias Boone did not answer. In the book, Clara Weaver said. 400 pages of assays, 5 men, 13 years, Mr. Somebody was paying for it. Somebody signed the drafts. Somebody's name is in that book. And Elias Boone said, It's not. Clara Weaver stood up. That's not possible. Ma'am, that's not possible, mister. You were 5 boys with no money, and a man funded a mine. That's thousands of dollars. That's years. There's a name on something. There isn't, Elias Boone said. I've looked for 11 years. There's no name. There's no letter. There's no draft. There's not 1 piece of paper in this cabin or in that county with that man's name on it, and Miss Weaver, I want you to understand what that means. Clara Weaver said he paid cash. For 4 years, Elias Boone said. In person, every time. He came up that mountain himself with money in a bag, and he handed it to 5 boys, and he never signed 1 thing. Clara Weaver said, Then how'd he pay you? Elias Boone stopped. Ma'am. $4,000, Clara Weaver said. Your share. In 73. Mr. Boone, you were in a bed in Boise City with a broken leg. He didn't hand you a bag of money in a hole in a mountain. Elias Boone did not move. How'd he pay you? Clara Weaver said, and Elias Boone said, by draft. The cabin went silent. Clara Weaver said very quietly, Mr. Boone, where's the draft? He stood there. Mr. Boone, ma'am, where is the draft? And Elias Boone said, I gave it to Amos Dill in April of 1879. I gave it to Amos Dill in April of 1879. Elias Boone said, and I have not slept one whole night since. Clara Weaver sat down on the floor of that cabin. You paid for the notes with his draft? Yes, ma'am. You walked into a store, she said, with a piece of paper that has that man's name on it. It hasn't got his name on it. Then, it's got a bank on it, Elias Boone said. That's all. $4,100 drawn on the merchants and miners of Denver, dated the 9th of December, 1873, and there's a signature on the bottom of it, and I have looked at that signature about 4,000 times in 9 years, and it is not a name. Clara Weaver said, what is it? And Elias Boone said, it's a number. She got up. Show me. I can't. Mr. Boone. Ma'am, I gave it to Amos Dill. He put both hands on the table. That's what I've been telling you. It's in that store. It's been in that store 4 years. I laid it on his counter in April of '79, and I bought 9 notes with it, and I walked up this mountain, and I have never once gone back for it. Clara Weaver went white. Then it's down there. It's down there. The only piece of paper on this earth. With that man's Mr. Boone, you gave it away. And Elias Boone said, I had to spend it, ma'am. That was the whole point. I was never going to spend $4,000 of that man's money on myself. She walked out. She got about 11 feet into that yard and stopped and stood there with both hands on her head, and then she came back in, and she was so angry, her voice came out flat. You spent it on 9 families. Yes, ma'am. On purpose. Yes, ma'am. Mr. Boone. Clara Weaver put both hands on that table across from him. You took blood money from a man who murdered your 4 friends, and you spent every dollar of it keeping 9 strangers on their ground, and you have never told one of them, and you let them all think you're a monster. Elias Boone did not answer. Say it, Clara Weaver said, and Elias Boone said, yes, ma'am, that's what I did. Why, ma'am, why? She was shaking. Why not, mister? You could have gone anywhere. $4,000 in '73. You could have gone to San Francisco. You could have gone to Boston. You could have been on a ship. He'd have found me. You don't know that. He found Hurd in Nevada, Elias Boone said. The cabin went quiet. Hurd ran, Elias Boone said. That's the part nobody knows. Hurd ran in the spring of '73. He lit out of this territory with a satchel he told nobody he didn't tell me, and he was in a hotel in Elko in October, and he put a gun in his mouth. Clara Weaver couldn't breathe. And ma'am, Elias Boone said, here's what I've been sitting on for 9 years. Hurd was left-handed. Clara Weaver sat down. Say that again. Hurd was left-handed, Elias Boone said. I knew that boy 4 years. He wrote left-handed. He shot left-handed. He ate left-handed, and it drove Delaney crazy because he'd knock your elbow at a table. Mr. Boone, and the coroner in Elko wrote it up, Elias Boone said, and I got a copy of it in '74 because I was in a bed with a broken leg, and I had nothing to do but write letters, and ma'am, it took me 4 months, and it cost me $11, and I have had that piece of paper for 8 years. What's it say? And Elias Boone said, wound to the right temple, weapon in right hand. Nobody moved for 11 seconds. That's it, Clara Weaver whispered. That's it. Mr. Boone, that's proof. That's a typographical error, Elias Boone said. That's what any lawyer in this territory would say, and they'd be right to say it. That's a coroner in a mining town in 1873 who saw 4 bodies that month and wrote the word right instead of left. And ma'am, there is not one court in the United States that would hang a man on it. Clara Weaver stood up. Then why'd you keep it? And Elias Boone said, "Because it's not by itself, Pope." He went to that shelf. He took down the German book, and he took down the other three, and then he did something Clara Weaver had never seen. He got down on the floor with a bad leg, which took him about 40 seconds, and he put his hand under the bottom board of that shelf and pulled. The whole board came out, and there was a tin box in the wall. 9 years, Elias Boone said. Hi. He put it on the table. Mr. Boone. Sit down, ma'am. Mr. Boone, what's in sit down? Clara Weaver sat down. Elias Boone opened that box, and Clara Weaver looked at 4 years of a man's life in a tin box in a wall, and she said out loud, "Oh my God." There were letters. There were 11 of them, and they were tied with string, and they were addressed to Elias Boone, and they were from 4 different states. Whitcomb's mother, Elias Boone said. 9 letters, 1874 to 1878. She wrote me every year till she died. What did she say? And Elias Boone said, she said her boy didn't die in a cave-in. Clara Weaver put her hand over her mouth. She was there, Elias Boone said. That's the thing. That's the thing nobody ever thought about. Ben Whitcomb's mother came out from Ohio in April of '70, and she was in Boise City when they brought him down, and ma'am, she looked at him. Mr. Boone. A cave-in crushes a man, Elias Boone said. That's what it does. That's all it does. It's rock, and it comes down, and there's not one part of you that doesn't know it happened. Clara Weaver couldn't speak. And she wrote me in 1874, Elias Boone said. And she said, Mr. Boone, my son had 2 broken ribs and a hole in the back of his head, and nothing else wrong with him. And I have been asking people about that for 4 years, and every man in Idaho tells me I am a grieving mother. Clara Weaver said, Did you write her back? Elias Boone did not answer. Mr. Boone, did you write her back? No, ma'am. You didn't. 9 letters, Elias Boone said. 4 years. That woman wrote me 9 letters, and I read every single one, and I never answered one of them. And she died in '78 in Ohio, and the last one... He stopped. He put his hand over his mouth. Read it, Clara Weaver said. Ma'am, read it, Mr. Boone. Oh, he read it. His voice did not hold, and he read it anyway. Mr. Boone, this is the 9th, and it is the last, because I have got the cancer, and I am told it is quick. I am not angry with you. I want you to know that. I have had 4 years to be angry, and I have used it all up. I think you are frightened, and I think you have got good reason, and I think if you were not frightened, you would be dead like my boy. Clara Weaver was crying. So I am going to ask you one thing, and then I will leave you be forever. If you ever stop being frightened, and I do not think you will, and I do not blame you, I would like somebody to say Ben's name out loud in a room with a judge in it. That is all. Not for me. I will be gone. But he was 24, and he was funny, and there is nobody left who knew that but you, Ruth Whitcomb. Elias Boone put that letter down. That's 4 years ago, he said. Judd. Clara Weaver stood up. You said 9 letters. Yes, ma'am. There's 11 in that box. Elias Boone did not move. Mr. Boone. Clara Weaver came around that table. There's 11. And Elias Boone said, the other 2 aren't from her. She picked them up. She picked them up and she looked at the front of them, and she went cold from the neck down, because there was no address on either one. There was no postmark. There was no stamp. There was one word. Elias. In a hand so beautiful it looked printed. Clara Weaver said, That's him. Yes, ma'am. That's him. Yes, ma'am. You said he never wrote you. Her voice was rising. You said 9 years, not a letter, not a man at the gate, nothing. And Elias Boone said, he didn't mail them. Clara Weaver said, What? They were in this cabin, Elias Boone said. She dropped both letters on the table. Mr. Boone. 1876, Elias Boone said. August. I came in from the creek and there was an envelope on that table, and I have never in my life been so frightened. And I stood in that door for about 11 minutes before I could make myself pick it up. He was here. He was here. He was in your house. He was in my house, Elias Boone said, and he sat in that chair and he left a letter on that table, and Miss Weaver, he made coffee. Clara Weaver sat down. He what? There was a cup in the sink, Elias Boone said. He came into my house and he made himself a pot of coffee, and he sat at my table and he wrote me a letter and he washed his own cup and left it in the sink. What'd it say? And Elias Boone said, read it. She opened it. She read it out loud because she couldn't not. Elias, I came up to see the mountain and you were out. That leg is doing better than I expected. I watched you at the creek for about 10 minutes, and you have got your weight wrong on the downhill, and it is going to cost you a hip by 40. Shift it forward. I am not being kind. I need you upright. Clara Weaver stopped. That's... Keep going, Elias Boone said. The coffee is bad. Get the arbuckle. J. The cabin went silent. J, Clara Weaver said. J. That's a letter. That's a letter, Elias Boone agreed. That's the only thing on this earth I've got. 9 years, one initial. Clara, while we were down that mountain buying salt. It was on that table when we got back, and I put it in that box, and I have not said one word to you about it for 6 days. Clara Weaver picked it up off the floor. Her hands would not work. It took her 4 tries to get it open, and Elias Boone did not help her, and she read it standing up in the middle of that cabin. Elias, the girl is good. Better than good. She got that elk at 90 yards in February, and I would like you to know that I watched her do it, and I said out loud, well, there it is. Clara Weaver stopped. She could not go on. Read it, Elias Boone said. Mr. Boone. Read it, ma'am. I've read it 11 times. I'd like to hear it once out loud. She read it. I have waited 9 years for you to need somebody, and you never did, and it was the most impressive thing I have ever watched a man do. 9 years, alone, with that leg. I want you to understand, I am not being cruel. I mean it. I did not think you had it in you, and I have been wrong about very few people. Clara Weaver's voice was shaking, but you have got her now, and that changes the arithmetic, and I think you know exactly how, and I think that is why you have not thrown this letter in the stove. She stopped. There's more, Elias Boone said. I will come in the spring, not to take anything. There is nothing on that mountain I want, and I think you found that out in October of 1872, and I think you have been sitting on it for 11 years, like a man sitting on a nail. Clara Weaver went white. He knows, she said. Keep reading. Mr. Boone, he knows it quits. Keep reading, ma'am. I have known since 1874, Clara Weaver read. Elias, I have known since 1874. I did not need 11 feet. I needed 4 men and a boy in a bed, and I got all of it. J. The cabin was absolutely silent. Clara Weaver sat down on the floor. That's not, ma'am, that's not possible. She had both hands on her head. Mr. Boone, that's you said he doesn't know. You said the whole 9 years is because he doesn't know it quits. You said that's the only reason you're alive. Yes, ma'am. And he's known for 8 years. And Elias Boone said, since 74. She stood up. Then why am I here? She said. Elias Boone didn't answer. Mr. Boone, why am I here? She was shouting. Why'd he tell me to count flour? Why'd he sit in a store on a Tuesday and put a sentence in my mouth? Why'd he watch me shoot an elk? Why'd he miss her if he's known for 8 years that mountain's worthless? Then none of this is about the mountain. No, ma'am. Then what's it about? And Elias Boone said, It's about the 4 men. Clara Weaver stopped. What? Ma'am, sit down. Don't tell me to... Sit down, Miss Weaver, because I've had 6 days with that letter, and I've got it, and I don't want to say it standing up. She sat down. Elias Boone put both hands flat on that table. He didn't kill 4 men for silver, he said. Then why? Because they found out he was 30, Elias Boone said. The cabin went silent. That's it, Elias Boone said. That's the whole thing. 9 years and 4,000 hours in that bed, and it's that. Whitcomb took a photograph home at Christmas, and his mother looked at it and said that boy's not 50, and Whitcomb came back in February and told the 4 of us in a room, and we laughed, ma'am. Clara Weaver had her hand over her mouth, and he was dead in 8 weeks, Elias Boone said. That's not enough, Clara Weaver said. Ma'am, that's not enough, mister. She was standing again. A man doesn't kill 4 people over his age. He does if his age is the whole thing, Elias Boone said. Clara Weaver stopped. Think, Elias Boone said. Think about it for 1 minute. A man of 30 walks into a boarding house in Denver in 1869 and tells 5 boys he's 50, and he does it so well that 5 educated men believe him for 4 years. Ma'am, why? Because he wanted... Because nobody funds a 30-year-old, Elias Boone said. The lamp guttered. That's the business, Elias Boone said. That's the whole business, and it took me 9 years. He wasn't the money, Miss Weaver. He found the money. He was a boy of 30 in a good coat who walked into rooms full of men with capital and told them he was 50, and they believed him because he was good at it. And then he took their money and put it in the ground. Clara Weaver said, He was a broker. He was a fraud, Elias Boone said. And ma'am, here's the part he wasn't defrauding us. He was defrauding whoever gave him that $4,000, and I don't know who they were and I never have. Mr. Boone, that draft's drawn on the merchants and miners of Denver, Elias Boone said, and there's a number on the signature line, and I have known for 9 years exactly what a number on a signature line means, and I have been too much of a coward to say it out loud. What's it mean? And Elias Boone said, It means it's not his account. Clara Weaver sat down. He was spending somebody else's money. For 4 years. On 5 boys and a mountain. On 5 boys and a mountain, Elias Boone said. And ma'am, what happens to a man like that if word gets around that he's 30? Clara Weaver said nothing. What? Nothing, Mr. Boone. She looked up. That's what I'm saying. Nothing happens. So he's young. So what? He's still got the mine. He's still got the survey. He's still... She stopped. Everything in her stopped. Oh, she said. Wait, say it, Elias Boone said. They'd look at the rest of it, Clara Weaver whispered. Elias Boone put his face in his hands. They'd look at the rest of it, Clara Weaver said, and she was standing now. That's it. That's mister, if you find out a man lied about being 50, you don't care about his age, you go check everything else he ever told you. Yes, ma'am. And what else did he tell them? And Elias Boone said that he had a mine. Nobody moved. He did have a mine, Clara Weaver said slowly. He had 11 feet of one, Elias Boone said. But that's... He had 11 feet of the best silver anybody ever saw, Elias Boone said. And ma'am, that's not a mine. That's a sample. And he'd been raising money against it since 1869, and he'd been telling men in Denver and San Francisco, and God knows where else, that there was a strike in Idaho. And he had 5 engineers on it to prove it, and every one of them had a school certificate and a good name. Clara Weaver said, You were the proof. We were the proof, Elias Boone said. That's what we were for. 5 boys out of Colorado School of Mines with clean records working a hole in Idaho, and he'd take our names into a room in Denver and say, Gentlemen, I've got Whitcomb and Ross and Boone on it." Clara Weaver put both hands on the table. "And if you'd said one word, if any one of us had said one word," Elias Boone said, "in a bar in a letter to a girl, my investor's not 50. He's 30. Isn't that a hoot? That's it. That's the end. Because the men who gave him that money are not idiots, ma'am. They're rich. And the second one of them hears that a man lied about something as stupid as his age, he sends somebody to Idaho to look at the hole." Clara Weaver said, "And the hole quits at 11 feet. "The hole quits at 11 feet, Elias Boone said. The cabin went silent. "He didn't kill 4 men for the mine," Clara Weaver said. "No, ma'am. He killed them for a joke. He killed them," Elias Boone said, "because 5 boys in a room in February of 1870 laughed about his coat." Clara Weaver walked out. She got out that door and got about 11 feet and put both hands on her knees and could not get air, and she stood there in the dark for 4 minutes. Elias Boone came out behind her. "Ma'am, don't. Miss Weaver, don't. I'm going to say one thing," Elias Boone said. She straightened up. "Then say it." And Elias Boone said, "I'm the one who laughed the longest." She turned around. "Mr. Boone." "I laughed the longest," he said. "Ma'am, in that room. In February." Whitcomb said it, and Ross made a face, and Delaney said something ugly about the hat, and I laughed for about 4 minutes, and I could not stop, and Hurd hit me with his own hat to make me quit. That's not, and 8 weeks later, Ben Whitcomb was under a rock. Elias Boone said, "And I have been carrying that up this mountain for 9 years, and I would like one person on this earth to know it before I die." Clara Weaver stood in that yard. "Mr. Boone." "Ma'am." "That's not why they're dead." And Elias Boone said, "Yes, ma'am, it is." "No," Clara Weaver said. "No." "Miss Weaver." "No." She came 4 steps at him. "You listen to me. I'm 19 years old, and I've been up this mountain 9 months, and I don't know a thing about mines or German or assays, but mister, I know one thing better than anybody in this territory, and I know it because I've been sold twice." Elias Boone stopped. "Twice." "Twice," Clara Weaver said. "My mother died when I was 7, and my father married a woman in 11 weeks because he needed somebody to keep the house, and that's the first one, and she sold me for flour, and that's the second one, and I have spent 12 years in a house with somebody who was doing arithmetic about me every single day." "Ma'am." "So you listen," Clara Weaver said. "A man who kills 4 people over a laugh is a man who lost his temper. And a man who lost his temper doesn't wait 9 years and then leave a letter about your hip." Elias Boone did not move. "That's not temper," Clara Weaver said. "That's not Mr. Boone. Look at what he did. 4 men in 4 years, all different, all clean, all 1,000 miles apart. That's not somebody who's angry. That's somebody doing work." Elias Boone said, "Miss Weaver." "He didn't kill them for the joke," Clara Weaver said. "He killed them because they were witnesses, and the joke's just when he found out he had them." "The wind came off that mountain." "That's the same thing," Elias Boone said. "No, it isn't." "Ma'am." "It isn't, mister, and here's the difference, and it's the whole thing." Clara Weaver's voice was shaking. "If he did it because he was angry, then you're alive by luck. And if he did it because he was working—" She stopped. Elias Boone said, "Say it." And Clara Weaver said, "Then you're alive on purpose." Nobody spoke for a long moment. Elias Boone sat down on his own step. 9 years, he said. "Mr. Boone." 9 years. I've been calling it luck. His voice had gone. 9 years, ma'am. Every morning. I wake up and I'm alive, and I say, well, one more. I've been treating it like weather. Clara Weaver sat down next to him. "It's not weather," she said. "No, ma'am." He kept you. He kept me, Elias Boone said. Why? And Elias Boone said, That's the question I've had wrong for 9 years. Boise. He looked up. I've been asking why he hasn't killed me, he said. That's the wrong question. That's the wrong question, and I've been asking it 4,000 times, and it's wrong. Then what's the right one? And Elias Boone said, What am I for? Panged. Clara Weaver stood up. Mr. Boone. Ma'am. What are you for? Elias Boone put both hands over his face. I'm the last one, he said. That's what he said. That's what he said in a bed in Boise City in November of 1873, when I didn't know 4 men were dead. Elias Boone said, and I have spent 9 years thinking it was a threat, and ma'am, it wasn't a threat. It was a job description. Clara Weaver went cold. Say that again. And Elias Boone said, I'm the last engineer. He stood up. It took him 11 seconds, and he did it anyway. He's got 4 dead men and a hole that quits, Elias Boone said, and he's got somebody's $4,000 in the ground, and Miss Weaver, what's the one thing he needs on this earth? Clara Weaver said, a living one. He needs a live engineer, Elias Boone said, with a school certificate and a clean name and 4 books of assays in his own hand. He needs one man who can stand in a room in Denver and say, Gentlemen, I worked that mountain from 1869 to 1874, and here's what's in it. But it quits. He doesn't need the truth, Elias Boone said. He needs a witness. Clara Weaver sat down on the step. Oh God, she said. That's why I'm alive, Elias Boone said. 9 years. That's the whole 9 years, ma'am, and I've been up here thinking I was hiding and I was being stored. Mr. Boone, he put me on a shelf, Elias Boone said, in 74, and he's been coming up here every few years to make sure I'm still on it. And he watched me at the creek in 76, and he told me to fix my hip, because a man with a ruined hip can't stand up in a courtroom in Denver. Clara Weaver put her face in her hands. He's been maintaining you, she said. For 9 years, Elias Boone said. She said, then why now? Elias Boone didn't answer. Mr. Boone, why now? She stood up. 9 years he's left you alone. 9 years. And then in June, he walks into a store and puts a sentence in a girl's mouth, and 4 months later, he's writing letters about my elk. She stopped. Everything stopped. Mr. Boone, Clara Weaver said, what happened in June? And Elias Boone said, somebody called the money. Clara Weaver said, what? That's the only thing it can be. He was talking fast now, and she'd never heard it. Ma'am, think about it. 9 years of nothing, and then all at once, he's in a store on a Tuesday. A man like that doesn't get bored. He doesn't get sentimental. Something moved. Moved how? Somebody wants their $4,000, Elias Boone said. Or 40, or 400. I don't know what he raised, and I never have. But somebody in Denver or San Francisco has gone back through 9 years of paper and found a hole in Idaho with 5 engineers' names on it, and they've asked a question. Clara Weaver said, and 4 of them are dead. And 4 of them are dead, Elias Boone said, which is very hard to explain. He turned around. So he needs the 5th one, Elias Boone said. He needs you to lie. He needs me to testify, Elias Boone said. In a room, with men in it. And ma'am, he doesn't need me to say there's silver in it. He's smarter than that. He never once in his life told a lie that could be checked. Then what does he need? And Elias Boone said, he needs me to say the other 4 died in accidents. The yard went silent. That's it, Elias Boone said. That's the whole thing. That's what 9 years of flour and blankets and a case of medicine in a shed have been for, and I never knew it. And I have been sitting up here for 9 years getting ready for a man to come kill me, and he's coming to hire me. Clara Weaver said, "Then say no." "Ma'am, say no." And Elias Boone said, "Then he burns 9 families." Clara Weaver went absolutely still. "What?" "9 notes," Elias Boone said. She put her hand on the porch post. "Mr. Boone, you hold the notes. I hold the paper," Elias Boone said. "In a box, in this cabin. Ma'am, listen to me. 9 notes, $4,100. And who paid for them?" Clara Weaver could not speak. "He did," Elias Boone said. "Every dollar. That's his draft. That's his money in Amos Dill's till since April of '79, and Miss Weaver, I have been telling myself for 4 years that I spent his money on something good, and I have been so proud of that. I have laid in that bed and been proud of it." His voice broke. "And he let me," Elias Boone said. Clara Weaver sat down on the step. "He let you," she said. "He let me." Elias Boone put both hands on his head. 9 years. He watched me take $4,000 of a fraud's money and buy 9 families and hide it in a shed, and he never said one word, because, ma'am, what did I just do? Mr. Boone, what did I just do? And Clara Weaver said, "You gave him 9 hostages." Didn't. Nobody moved for 11 seconds. "Every single one," Elias Boone said. "The Ferrises, the Dolans, old Amos at the mill, your father's house, your house, ma'am, the one your stepmother's sitting in tonight." Clara Weaver stood up. "He can't call those notes. He doesn't have to call them," Elias Boone said. "He doesn't have to do one single thing. All he has to do is come up that road in the spring and sit at this table and say, 'Elias, 9 families,' and I'll do whatever he asks." Clara Weaver said, "Then burn them." Elias Boone stopped. "Ma'am, burn them." She was walking toward that cabin. "Mr. Boone, they're paper. They're in a box in your wall. Burn the whole box, and there's no notes, and there's no hostages, and there's nothing he can—" "I can't," Elias Boone said. She turned around. "Why not?" "Because I don't hold them," Elias Boone said. The yard went silent. "What?" "I bought them," Elias Boone said. "I didn't hold them. Ma'am, I'm a man with a bad leg in a cabin. What do I know about paper? I laid $4,000 on Amos Dill's counter in April of '79, and I said, 'Buy me these 9, and he did it, and he wrote it up, and I have never once had those notes in my hands." Clara Weaver said, "Then who has them?" And Elias Boone said, "Amos Dill's got them in a safe in that store, and I have been paying him $11 a year to keep them there for 4 years. Clara Weaver sat down on the ground. "Mr. Boone?" "Ma'am?" "Mr. Boone, that man was in that store." Elias Boone did not move. "He was in that store in June," Clara Weaver said. "He was standing at the back of that store when I walked in and asked Amos Dill for my father's note out loud in front of 11 men. Elias Boone put his hand on the wall. "And Amos told me," Clara Weaver said. "Amos told me the whole thing. 9 notes, $4,100. He said it out loud, mister, in a store in front of everybody, and there was a man in a good coat at the back listening to every word." "Ma'am?" "He was there," Clara Weaver said, and she was on her feet now, and she was shouting. "He was there, and he heard it, and then he waited till I was 4 steps from the door, and he told me to count the flour, and Mr. Boone, why did he wait?" Elias Boone said, "Say it." "He waited till he'd heard everything," Clara Weaver said. "Yes, ma'am. He didn't come to that store for you," she said. "He came to that store for Amos Dill, and I walked in the door and started asking questions, and he let me do it." And Elias Boone said, "He used you to open the safe." The wind came off that mountain. 9 months ago, Clara Weaver whispered. 9 months. "Mr. Boone, that's 9 months. He's had 9 months." "Ma'am?" "He's had 9 months, and a name and a store, and he knows exactly where 9 families' notes are." "Miss Weaver." "What?" And Elias Boone said, Amos Dill hasn't opened that store since October. Clara Weaver stopped. What? October? Elias Boone said, My trip. I went down for salt, and there was a boy behind that counter. 15 years old. Amos's grandson. And I said, Where's Amos? And the boy said he's been poorly. And I bought my salt. They set off at 4 o'clock in the morning, and Elias Boone spurred his horse forward faster than he had in 9 years, and neither spoke a word for the 11 miles. Rode at 4 in the morning, and Elias Boone drove that horse harder than he had in 9 years, and it was Clara Weaver who broke it open 11 miles out with a register on her lap and a lamp between her knees. Stop the wagon. Ma'am? Stop the wagon. He stopped it. He can't read the books, Clara Weaver said. Elias Boone turned around on that seat. What? He's been in your house twice. He knows exactly where they are. He could have burned them any night in 9 years and there'd be nothing on this earth. She had the lamp up. Why hasn't he? Elias Boone did not move. Say it, Clara Weaver said. And Elias Boone said, Because they're worthless without me. They're worthless without you, she said. 400 pages of numbers, and nobody alive can say what they mean but one man with a bad leg. Burn them, he's got nothing to sell. Kill you, he's got a book nobody can read. He can't have one without the other. That's not a hostage, Mr. Boone. That's a partnership. He's been in one with you for 9 years, and you're the only one who didn't know. Elias Boone sat there 11 seconds. Then he's afraid of me. Yes, sir. Ma'am, I've been terrified. So has he, Clara Weaver said. He started laughing. It went on 4 seconds and stopped like a door. 9 years of a man leaving me letters about my hip. He wasn't maintaining you, Clara Weaver said. He was negotiating. Every letter. 32 questions at a stove. That's a man on the other side of a table who can't come to the table. Why not? Because the second he asks you, you know he needs you. That's June, Elias Boone said. That's June. 9 years and he couldn't do it, and then the bank started pulling that thread and he ran out of time and he still couldn't walk up this mountain and say it. So he used a girl in a store. 4 words. Her voice was shaking. That wasn't a threat, Mr. Boone. That was a man knocking. That's the ugliest thing I ever heard. Yes, sir? He watched a girl get sold and used it as a door. He stopped. Everything in that wagon stopped. What? Clara Weaver said. And Elias Boone said, Who told your stepmother? She went cold from the neck down. You told me in that road in June, first day. She didn't pick me. Somebody came to that house. Elias Boone's hands were tight on the reins. And I never asked you about it. 9 months. Because I've been a coward for 9 years and I have got a talent for not asking. Clara Weaver stood up in a moving wagon. He came to my house. He told her to sell me to a cripple nobody'd go near. She could not get air. He picked me mister, and he'd have had to know I'd last. He watched you shoot an elk at 90 yards in February, Elias Boone said, and wrote me a letter about it. That's not a man checking an investment. That's a man saying I was right. How'd he know? Clara Weaver said. I was a girl who scrubbed a floor. I'd never held a rifle. There wasn't one thing about me a man in a good coat could look at and... She stopped. The books, she said. She turned all the way around. I kept my father's books since I was 11. Every week, in that store, Amos Dill's counter every Saturday for 8 years, I'd sit on a nail keg and do my father's figures, because he couldn't. Elias Boone said, Oh. And there was a stove 4 feet away, Clara Weaver said, and her voice broke. He watched me do it, 4 times a year, 8 years, 32 times. Elias Boone stopped that wagon again and put his head down on his own hands. He didn't pick a girl, he said. He picked a bookkeeper. and put her in a house with 400 pages of assays and 9 months of winter. Why? And Clara Weaver said, because he needs somebody who can read them who isn't you. The wind came off that mountain. He needs a second one, she said. You said it yourself. He can't have the books without you, and he can't have you without the books. He's been stuck in it since '74, so he made another one. No. Mr. Boone, no. He was shaking his head. Then he doesn't need me at all. Then He stopped, and Clara Weaver watched a man understand something on a wagon seat at 5 a.m, and she carried it the rest of her life. Say it, she said. And Elias Boone said, then I'm done in the spring. Nobody spoke. That's the letter, he said. The girl is good. Better than good. That's not a compliment, ma'am. That's a receipt. I have waited 9 years for you to need somebody, and you never did. But you have got her now. And that changes the arithmetic. Clara Weaver put both hands over her mouth. 9 years he couldn't touch me, because there was one man alive who could read those books, Elias Boone said, and in 9 months I made him a second one, for free, because I was lonesome.
Cha-ting.
Then he kills you in the spring, Clara Weaver said, and I'm the witness. And I'd do it, Mr. Boone, wouldn't I? He'd have 9 families in one hand and my whole life in the other, and I'm 19. You wouldn't. You don't know that. I do know that. How? And Elias Boone said, because you walked 11 miles up a mountain in a blue dress. That's not enough. It's all I've got, ma'am. I've been 9 years on nothing. I'll take it. He picked up the reins. Where are we going? Clara Weaver said. And Elias Boone said 9 houses. They knocked on the first door at 6 a.m, and Elias Boone did not run. That was the thing that undid her, a man with a stick standing on a porch, with his hat off counting to 11, and it took Ferris 4 seconds. Mr. Ferris, my name's Elias Boone. And Ferris said, I know who you are. You bought my note. Elias Boone stopped. What? April of 1879, $4,100, 9 of us. Ferris was 45 and his face was coming apart. Amos Dill mailed me a paper in October marked paid, and I sat in my own kitchen and cried for an hour, and I have known since the 4th of November. How? 'Cause I asked him. Clara Weaver said, he swore. He swore on his mother, Mr. Ferris. He kept it, Ferris said. I said, Amos, did the store forgive it? And he said, yes. And I said, Amos, look at me and say it. Nobody breathed. And he cried, Ferris said. 70 years old, in a bed. Couldn't get one word out. I stood there 4 minutes and I said, all right, Amos, and I went home. He never told you. He never told me. He'll die keeping it. I want that understood. Then how do you know? And Ferris said, Mr. Boone, there's 400 people in this county, and one of 'em's got $4,000. Elias Boone sat down on a stranger's step and could not get up. 9 families. 9 families. Every one. Since November. We've had 4 meetings about it and we couldn't figure out how to say it to you 'cause you don't open the door. Dolan said right up there. Mrs. Pell said you'd shut it in our faces. Ferris stopped. And then June happened. June. You come down that mountain and cut open a flour sack in the street, in front of 400 people, and you talked. Ferris came out on that porch. Mr. Boone, you know what this county's been doing since June, arguing about you. 200 says you're a monster who bought a girl, and 200's been sitting real quiet since November holding a piece of paper marked paid. Clara Weaver put her hand over her mouth. And every one of that second 200, Ferris said, has been waiting 9 months for somebody to be brave enough to say it out loud. Wait, why didn't you? Elias Boone said. And Ferris said, 'cause we was ashamed. Nobody moved. 9 years I've called you a cripple in my own kitchen. My children have heard me say it. And then I open an envelope in November and find out that man's been carrying my house on his back since '79 and never once come down that road about it. His voice broke wide open. What do I do with that? I've hated a man for 9 years for saving me. There ain't a word for what that is. Elias Boone stood up. There's a word. It's my fault. What? I let you. 9 years. I could have knocked on this door any day since '79, and I told myself I'm a private man and that's a lie, and I've known it's a lie for 4 years. Then why? And Elias Boone said, because if you didn't know, you couldn't ask me for anything else. Clara Weaver turned around. That's the truth, Elias Boone said. If 9 families knew, 9 families would come up that mountain and they'd need things and I'd have to see them. And ma'am, I have got 1 leg and 400 pages of dead men's handwriting, and I did not have room. Ferris said, you bought 9 houses, so you wouldn't have to talk to nobody. Yes, sir. That's exactly what I did. Ferris stood in that door a long moment. That's the most honest thing anybody's ever said to me, he said. I've been in this valley 40 years, and every man in it's a liar about himself, including me, and you just told me you saved my life 'cause you're a coward. He came down that step. So I'm going to ask you a question. I've had it 9 months. What do you need? Nothing. Mr. Boone. I don't need anything. What do you need? Ferris said. And Elias Boone stood on a stranger's porch and could not get 1 word out for 11 seconds, and Clara Weaver watched a man of 38 fail the easiest question in the English language. Mr. Boone, she said, tell him. And Elias Boone said, there's a man coming in the spring. They rode 9 houses in 1 day. He told it 9 times, and it got worse every time, and by the 4th his voice was gone, and Clara Weaver took it over. By the 7th there were 4 wagons behind them. By dark there were 40 people in Elias Boone's yard. He stood on his own step and could not look at them. Say something, Clara Weaver said. Clara, I don't know how. She stopped. He'd never once said her name. 9 months. It had been Ma'am and Miss Weaver 400 times, and he'd said Clara in front of 40 people and hadn't noticed. Then say that, she said. And Elias Boone turned around and said, I don't know how to do this. And nobody laughed. Mrs. Pell, 68, who had buried a husband and a sister, came out of that crowd. Then don't. Just tell us who's coming. A man named J. Hale, out of Denver. He murdered 4 men in this territory between 1870 and 1873, and he's kept me alive 9 years because I'm the only one who can read what's in that mountain. The yard went silent. And he's coming in the spring, and he's got nothing left to take from me. And I'd like you all to go home. Ferris said no. 40 people did not move. You don't understand what he is, Elias Boone said. There's no gunfight. He's going to come up that road alone in a good coat and sit at my table and be pleasant, and by the time he leaves, there won't be one thing anybody can prove. Then let him, Ferris said. Let him sit at your table, Mr. Boone, with 40 of us in the yard. Assoy. Elias Boone put his hand on the post. 9 years he's been coming up here, Ferris said. A window at a stove, letters on a table, a girl in a store. You know why, 'cause you was alone. Every single thing that man ever done to you, he done it, 'cause there wasn't nobody to see it. Clara Weaver said, that's it. Everybody turned. He picked 5 boys with no families, a cripple with no friends, a girl nobody wanted. Her voice broke. He's been picking people nobody'd miss for 13 years. And mister, there's 40 people in your yard. So, he came up that road on the 11th of April. Alone. In a good coat. In a hired buggy. And there were 60 people in that yard because 40 had gone to 60 in 3 weeks. And nobody could stop it. And J. Hale stopped that buggy and looked at all of them. And laughed. Well, he said. Nobody answered. He got down. Took his hat off. 43 years old and looking 50, and doing it so well that half the people in that yard would have sworn to it in a courtroom. Elias. J. That's a lot of people. Did you bring them for me or for you? Sit down. I'd rather stand. Sit down, J. And J. Hale sat down in a chair in a yard in front of 60 people and crossed his legs, and Clara Weaver understood with a jolt that went through her like ice that he was enjoying it. May I say something first? No, you've had 9 years to say something. 32 questions at a stove and 2 letters on my table, and you've never once asked me anything. Today you're going to ask, and you're going to do it out loud. J. Hale smiled. All right. He turned his hat over in his hands. Elias, I need you to come to Denver. There's a proceeding. Internal. The bank's examining accounts from 69 to 74, and my name's on them, and there are questions about a property in this territory, and I need an engineer's report. You need me to say it's worth something. No, J. Hale said. The yard went silent. I need you to say it's worth nothing. Clara Weaver said, What? Miss Weaver. He turned and looked at her, and it was the first time, and she had to hold the porch post. You've done well. I want you to know I've been genuinely pleased. Don't you? I need him to say the mountain quit at 11 feet in October of 1872. Which is true. It's the truest thing in this county under oath in a room. Why? Elias Boone said. And J. Hale said, Because then I'm a man who lost money. Nobody breathed. That's the entire thing. 9 years. If that mountain's worth something and I hit it, I'm a thief. If it's worth nothing and I put 4 years and $4,000 in it and it broke my heart, Elias, I'm a fool, and this country has never hanged a fool. Elias Boone sat down on his own step. You want the truth. I have wanted the truth for 9 years, and I could not ask you for it, because the day I ask, you know I need it. Ferris said, That's it, mister, you come up this mountain for that. He'll say it. Hell, he'd have said it in 74. Ain't nobody up here got a reason to Mr. Ferris, J. Hale said. Ferris stopped. He'd never told that man his name. Mr. Ferris, how much was your note? The yard went absolutely silent. $611. April of 79. Paid with a draft on the Merchants and Miners of Denver, number 4119, signed by an officer of that bank. He looked around. So it's my money. Every dollar. 9 houses. Yours, Dolan's, the mill, Miss Weaver's father's. He smiled pleasantly. 60 people and about 9 of you are standing on ground I paid for, and you found out in November, and you've been carrying it since. Elias Boone stood up. They didn't know. No, you made sure they didn't. And Elias, I want to tell you something I've wanted to tell you for 4 years. It was the finest thing I've ever watched a man do. Stop. You took $4,100 of the worst money in the West and bought 9 strangers and never told one of them. 9 years. J. Hale's voice did not move. I've been in banking 13 years and I have never once seen anybody do anything for free. Clara Weaver said, Then why'd you let him? Ma'am, you let him. You watched him spend your money on 9 families and never said one word. 4 years. Why? And J. Hale said, Because I wanted to see how long he'd carry it. The yard went cold. That's my whole occupation, Miss Weaver, finding out what people will carry. I'm the best in this country at it. A crippled man bought 9 houses out of spite and shame and told nobody, and I thought, well, let's see. See what? Whether he'd break. Everybody breaks. They carry it 3 years, and then one night they get lonesome, and they tell a woman, and it's over. He looked at Elias Boone. 9 years. He never told anybody. Dayton. Elias Boone said, Yes, I did. J. Hale stopped. It was small. It was maybe a quarter of a second. I beg your pardon? I told her, in February, in my kitchen, about the shed and the notes and Amos Dill and the medicine I never gave Nell Poole's sister. Elias Boone's voice was steady. I told her because she asked, and nobody had ever asked. J. Hale did not move. "That's not in your letter," Elias Boone said. "You wrote me last Tuesday about her elk, 90 yards, February, and about my hip. And you did not write one word about the fact that in February I told that girl everything I've got." Nobody breathed. "You didn't know," Elias Boone said. Clara Weaver came off that porch. He didn't know. 9 years of a window and 32 questions and 2 letters on a table, and he doesn't know what happens inside that cabin. "He never has," Elias Boone said. And J. Hale said very quietly, "That's enough." The yard stopped, because it had changed small and total, and every soul there felt it. A man in a good coat had said 3 words in a different voice. "There it is," Elias Boone said. 9 years, Jay. That's the first thing you've ever said to me that you didn't plan. You're being childish. You watched me at a creek. You read my mail. You counted my flour. You bought me a bookkeeper. You went to a woman's house in June and told her to sell a 19-year-old girl to a cripple because you needed a second reader and couldn't think of another way to put one in my house. 60 people made a sound. Sarah Weaver was in that yard. Nobody had noticed. She'd come up with the Dolans at 8 and stood at the back 3 hours, and now 60 people turned and looked at her, and she went the color of paper. "Say it," Clara Weaver said. "Clara Ruth." "Say it, ma'am." And Sarah Weaver said, "He came to the house in May, and he sat in your father's chair, and he said he was a man who helped people out of hard places, and he said there was 11 sacks of flour and a horse in it, and he said—" She stopped. "What did he say?" And Sarah Weaver said, "He said she'll die up there before the snow and nobody will ever ask you about it." The yard went absolutely silent. Clara Weaver turned around. "You told her I'd die, so she'd say yes." And J. Hale said yes. Nobody moved. "I needed her to say yes quickly, and a woman like that will not sell a girl for money. She'll sell one for permission. So I gave her some." He did not turn around. "That's the trade, ma'am. It always is. You didn't want 11 sacks of flour. You wanted somebody to tell you it was all right." Sarah Weaver made a sound. "And if I had died," Clara Weaver said, "you wouldn't have. You didn't know that. I watched you keep a man's books on a nail keg for 8 years. Every Saturday. 4 times a year I sat by that stove and watched a child of 11 carry 9 columns in her head. I have met 2 people in my life who could do that, and the other one's sitting on that step. I was 11. And J. Hale said, "Yes, that's when I started." Ferris came out of that crowd. "You son of a—" "Don't," Elias Boone said. "Elias, he's standing in your yard saying it out loud." "He's saying it out loud because it's not a crime." The yard stopped. 60 of you listen. He has stood here 20 minutes saying the ugliest things anybody's ever heard, and every one of them is legal, and he knows it, and that's why he's comfortable." He looked at Hale. "Isn't it?" And J. Hale said, "Yes. He never lied about anything that could be checked. 9 years. Not once. He signed his real name in Amos Dill's register in 74 because a name in a book is nothing. He told 5 boys he was 50 because nobody checks. He paid $4,000 with a number instead of a signature because a number's a procedure, not a lie." Clara Weaver said, "Mr. Boone, say the 12th thing." He went into that cabin. It took him 40 seconds and 60 people watched, and J. Hale did not move 1 inch, and Elias Boone came out with 4 books in his arms and put them on the table, and J. Hale's face changed. It was small. It was maybe half a second. "Whitcomb's hand," Elias Boone said. 1869 to the 4th of April, 1870. Elias. Ross's hand starting the 11th, 7 days later. J. Hale stood up. "Whitcomb died on the 9th, Elias Boone said. 60 people made a sound. Ross's last entry's the 2nd of June 71. Delaney's first is the 9th. Ross died the 4th. Delaney's last is the 11th of March 72. Hurd's first is the 18th. Delaney went off that trestle on the 14th. Elias. And Hurd's last entry is the 2nd of October, 1873. Mine's the 9th. Hurd shot himself in Elko on the 6th. The yard was silent. 4 gaps. 4 handoffs. Everyone inside 7 days. In 1 book. In 400 pages of rock essays nobody on this earth would ever look at in a cabin on a mountain for 9 years. He turned around. Jay, look at me. Jay Hale looked at him. You couldn't burn it because you couldn't read it. And you couldn't read it because you needed an engineer. And every engineer you had you killed. That proves nothing, Jay Hale said. No, sir. It's a sequence. It's exactly a sequence. It's not evidence of one single thing, and there's not a court in this country that'd hang you on it. Then why are we standing here? And Elias Boone said, because I'm not going to a court. The yard went still. I'm going to Denver, to your bank, to the proceeding, just like you asked, and I'm going to say the truth every word. The mountain quit at 11 feet in October of 1872, and you lost $4,000, and it's the truest thing in this county. Elias. And then I'm going to lay 4 books on that table and say, gentlemen, here's the assay record, and they're going to look at it about 4 minutes. Nobody breathed. And one of them's going to say, Mr. Boone, why does the handwriting change? Jay Hale said nothing. And I'm going to answer him. That's not perjury. That's not slander. That's a man answering a question in a room. I'll say 4 names and 4 dates, and then I'll sit down. They won't do anything. No, sir. They'll be very polite. And then they'll go back to their offices and pull 13 years of your paper, every account, every draft, every property you ever put money in. And you and I both know what they'll find. There's nothing to find. And Elias Boone said, they'll find your 43. Jay Hale went white. It was not small. 60 people saw it. That's the whole thing, 9 years. They don't have to prove one murder. They just have to open your file and count. You've been 50 since 1869. You got made an officer at 30, and not one man in that bank knows it. Elias Boone's voice did not move. The second somebody asks everything after, that is arithmetic. You'll lose the mountain. There's nothing in the mountain. You'll lose everything. I've got nothing. She'll lose everything, Jay Hale said. And the yard went cold. Clara Weaver said, say that again. Miss Weaver? Say it again, in front of 60 people. Say what happens to me. Jay Hale did not answer. He can't, Elias Boone said. For the first time in 13 years, he's standing in front of people who'd miss you. Gag. Clara Weaver walked out into that yard, 19 years old in front of 60 people, and a man in a good coat, and the woman who'd sold her. Mr. Hale, you told her I'd die before the snow. I did. And this whole county laughed. She turned around, and about half of them could not look back. 400 people in that street in June, and not one of you said my name. Nobody spoke. She turned back. And you sat in a store and watched a girl get sold and used it as a door. Yes, Jay Hale said. And Clara Weaver said, you made one mistake. You needed somebody nobody'd miss. That's your whole trade. 13 years, 5 boys with no families, a cripple with no friends, a girl nobody wanted. She was shaking. You looked at me across a store for 8 years and saw a child on a nail keg with 9 columns in her head and no people, and you thought, there it is. That's the perfect one. Yes, Jay Hale said. You were right. The yard went silent. I had nobody. You were right about every bit of it. 19 years and there wasn't one soul on this earth who'd have come looking for me, and you knew that, and you were right. She looked at Elias Boone. And you handed me to the one man in this territory who'd never once asked anybody for anything because you thought 2 people with nobody would make a tool. Her voice broke wide open. They made a family, Mr. Hale. That's the mistake. You put 2 people who'd never been wanted in one cabin for a winter and thought you were building an instrument. We built a house. No, nobody moved. I don't belong to anybody, Clara Weaver said. J. Hale did not answer. Say it back. Miss Weaver, say it back. My stepmother sold me for 9 sacks of flour and 2 sacks of chaff, and you told her I'd die and this whole county watched. I want one man to say it out loud. And J. Hale said, you don't belong to anybody. He got in that buggy. 60 people watched, and nobody stopped him because there was nothing to stop him for. He picked up the reins, and then he turned around. Elias, 9 years. 9 years. And J. Hale said, you were the only one I ever liked. I know, Elias Boone said. The yard went still. That's what I've been carrying. Not the fear, Jay. You sat by a bed for 4 days in Boise City and held a cup for a man with a broken leg and talked about German books, and it was the best 4 days of my life. And I have never once been able to make that a lie. You came down that shaft, 2 in the morning, in a good coat, with a rope. His voice was gone. You'd killed 4 men, and you came down a hole to get me out, and I have spent 9 years trying to put those 2 things in the same man, and I can't do it. And J. Hale said, then don't. He picked up the reins. That's the only advice I'll ever give you. Don't. It's not one man. It never was. There's no story that makes it one man, and you'll waste your life looking for it. I liked you. And I'd have killed you in the spring. Both are true, and there's nothing under them, Elias. There's no bottom. That's the part nobody ever believes. And Elias Boone said, I believe you. They came for J. Hale in Denver in November. It took the bank 7 months, and it did not start with a murder or a mountain. It started with a clerk of 24 named Pryor, who was told to pull the file on account 4119 and found a birth record from Ohio in a bundle of letters of reference from 1869. James Hale, born 1839. He'd been 30. That was the whole thing. A man lied about his age on an application in 1869, and 13 years later, a clerk did arithmetic. The bank fired him on a Tuesday. The rest took 4 years. Elias Boone testified 9 times. Once in Denver, in a room with 11 men in it, and 8 more across 4 states, and he laid 4 books on 4 tables and answered the same question, every time Mr. Boone. Why does the handwriting change? He never once said the word murder. He didn't have to. Ruth Whitcomb's 9 letters came in from a lawyer in Ohio in 1884 because she'd left them to a nephew with instructions. The coroner in Elko got asked about a left-handed man in 1885 and remembered it and cried. Amos Dill gave a deposition from a bed over a store in March of 1883 and died in June, and the register with J. Hale Denver Banking. In it went into a courthouse in Boise City and never came out. 11 things. Not one of them a crime. All of them together, a rope. They hanged him in 1886. Clara Weaver went. Elias Boone did not, and they had one fight about it, and it was the only one they ever had. You should come. No, ma'am. Mr. Boone. Clara. I liked him. That's the whole reason, and it's the only one I've got. I'm not going to stand in a square and watch it, because I don't know which one I'd be watching. And Clara Weaver said, all right. She went alone. She sat in that square and did not enjoy 1 second of it. And afterward she was sick in a hotel for an hour, and then she wrote 4 lines and mailed them, and they got to that mountain in 9 days. Elias, it's done. I did not feel one thing I expected. I am coming home Thursday. Don't meet me at the road. I'll walk it. Bah. There was never any silver. That's the part that got told wrong for 40 years in every version. The crippled man and the mountain of silver, and Clara Boone spent her whole life correcting it and never once won. The mountain quit at 11 feet. It quit in October of 1872, and it quit forever, and 4 men died for a hole with $400 of galena in it. What they built instead was a store. That was Clara's. She bought Amos Dill's building off his grandson in 1884 with the last of a dead banker's money, and she put a stove in it, and she kept the books herself on a nail keg by the window where a child had kept her father's. And she never once, not in 41 years, let a stranger sit at that stove without asking him his name. They married in 1885. 60 people. Ferris stood up with him. Mrs. Pell made the cake. Nell Poole cried through the whole thing. Sarah Weaver was not invited, and came anyway, and stood at the back, and Clara saw her there, and did not have her removed, and afterward on the step said one sentence to her. "You sold me for 9 sacks of flour." Clara Ruth. "You sold me for 9 sacks of flour, and I'd like you to know that's the going rate for the whole world." She went back inside. Sarah Weaver stood on that step a long time. Then she went home and lived 11 more years in a house a crippled man had paid for, and never told one living soul. And that was the entire punishment, and it was enough. He asked her once on the porch late, "Clara, why'd you get in the wagon?" "Mile 8. My feet were bleeding." "That's not why." "No," she said. "It's not." "Then why?" "Because you walked that horse for 4 hours." She didn't look at him. "Every time I stopped, you stopped. Mile 3, I stood in that road 4 minutes to see if you would. And you did." Her voice went. 19 years, Elias, and there was not one person on this earth who'd ever waited for me. He couldn't speak. "That's the whole thing. The 9 years, and the 4 dead men, and the mountain, and the books. You want to know how a man like Hale gets built? He gets built out of nobody ever waiting." She took his hand. "And you want to know how he loses? The same way." 61 years later, a woman of 80 told it to a newspaper man in that same store on that same nail keg, and he asked the question everybody always asked. "Mrs. Boone, was there ever really silver up there?" "No." "Then what was it worth?" She looked at him a long moment. "Young man, in June of 1882, my stepmother sold me for 9 sacks of flour and 2 sacks of chaff, and 400 people stood in that street and laughed, and a man in a good coat told her I'd be dead before the snow." She put her hand flat on the counter. "They thought they were throwing away a girl. They were wrong, and it took them 11 years and a hanging to find out, and I have owned this store for 51 years, and I have never once had to explain it to anybody who was actually there. They were wrong about the mountain, wrong about the silver, wrong about the cripple, and wrong about the girl, and wrong for 11 years, in every direction at once. But they were most wrong about the arithmetic, because a man who buys people counts what they cost, and a man who waits counts nothing at all." Elias Boone waited 4 hours on a road for a girl in a blue dress who had nothing. And that was the only price ever paid on that mountain that came back with interest.